Hi guys, this is Travis from Scroll Saw Goodies. This time we're going to be doing something a little bit different. We're going to be doing a screencast. I'm doing a screencast so I can kind of demonstrate how to create a scroll saw portrait pattern using Adobe Photoshop. Now I had a question in the forums not too long ago about how to do just this, and so I thought this would be a perfect opportunity to do a little demonstration. I'm going to be using a program called Adobe Photoshop. It's not necessarily something that I would recommend you go out and buy, namely due to the price tag. It's pretty hefty. Really, Adobe Photoshop, I wouldn't buy it unless you're going to be using it in a professional setting anyway. There's a lot of other programs out there that are a lot cheaper, and there's even a few of them that are actually free. And they'll do just about everything that Adobe Photoshop will. They might not be nearly as powerful, but they'll certainly suffice for any kind of pattern designing that we're going to be doing. But I'm going to show you in Adobe Photoshop, mostly due to the fact that that's what I'm mostly comfortable in. I've been using it for quite a few years, and it's just what I know. In future podcasts, maybe I'll go through some of the freeware programs and show you how to create patterns using those. So all the techniques I'm showing you in Adobe Photoshop will translate into other programs. The concepts are all the same. The buttons might be a little bit different, but the concepts are all the same. So let's just go ahead and jump in. I'm not really going to show you around Adobe Photoshop too much. I figure if you actually shelled out that kind of money to purchase this, chances are you probably already know how to use it for the most part. So I'll just show you the tools that we use as we use them and not really get bogged down into the nitty-gritty of it all. So the very first thing we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and open up the picture that we want to create a scroll saw pattern from. So I'm going to come up to File, Open, and it's going to be this dog portrait. Okay, so we're going to create a little portrait here. We only want the face, so we're going to crop all this other stuff out. So this is our project for this series. Okay, so what we got to do next is we're going to have to create a work area. I'm going to come up to File, New, and as you see it defaults to pixels. I don't want to work in pixels, I want to work in inches. So I'm going to choose inches, and I'm going to create an 8 by 10 portrait. So it's going to be 8 inches by 10 inches. 8 by 10 mostly because it's easy to find frames for. Resolution, I like to do 150 pixels per inch. It works really well because with the brush sizes, the common brush sizes that I use are about the same width as the curve of a saw blade, so I like to work at 150 pixels per inch. And I'm going to click OK. And right here is our work area. So now we got to get our picture, the picture of our dog here, into our work area. And to do that, we just select the dog picture, and you'll see the background under the layers. Just drag that over into your new document, and it places a copy there. You see the layer 1 here is our picture, and we no longer need the original, so I'm going to close that up. Okay, so now that we have our picture in our document, I'm going to go ahead and enlarge the portrait to the approximate size that I want to work with. Thing is with photo manipulation software, when you're working with bitmaps, it's better to work the exact size you want rather than having to rely on scaling later, because bitmaps don't really scale well. If you blow them up, they tend to get real jagged edges, or they tend to get real blurry edges. If you shrink it down, sometimes you get the same problems. And the computer has to kind of figure out how to use the edges and the blocks of color. So we want to control as much of that as we can, so we're going to go ahead and work the size that we want to work. So over here we have the move tool. So if you click that, and you'll see we have bounding boxes on the corners. This is how we scale images. As you see, if I grab one of those corners, I could scale it both on the X and Y axis. I'm going to Control Z that out to get back to our original size. If you hold down the Shift key and then drag, you'll see that it enlarges on both the X and Y axis at the same time, and it keeps the aspect ratio consistent. Looks like we're running out of space on here, so I'm going to hold down the Control key and hit the minus key, and that kind of zooms out, and now we can see our bounding box once again. So I'm going to continue sizing this up so that it more or less fills my entire work area. And I kind of like that. Remember to keep a little bit of margin there for the frame to cover, and I think I kind of like that. I think that's a pretty good size. Okay, down here you have the little hand tool, and you also have the little magnifier. If you double click the hand tool, it's going to zoom up so that it fills your screen. If you hit the magnifier, it goes to 100%. You can see the percentage right here of zoom. We want to just look at the entire image, so we're going to double click the hand tool. Okay, so over here we have, on our layers palette, we have our original picture. We like to try to keep the original picture as intact as much as possible. So usually when we manipulate something, we like to create a new layer, so we always have the original to revert to if things go terribly wrong. So I'm going to go ahead and create a new layer. And to duplicate this layer, all I got to do is drag this down to the new button. And what it does is it creates a new copy of that layer. So I'm going to go ahead and hide the original picture, and then we're going to manipulate the copy. As scroll saw artists, we tend to work with highlights and shadows. And highlights and shadows are much easier to see if they're in black and white. So we're going to take this layer and make it all black and white. So I'm going to come up to Image, Adjustments, and I'm going to desaturate that. And as you can see, it creates a black and white image. Now we want to manipulate the color balance, I guess you could call it. Even though it's a black and white image, we want to make sure that the blacks are about as black as you could get, the whites are about as white as you could get, or find a nice compromise in between. So I'm going to come up to Image, Adjustments, and Levels, and that brings up our Levels palette. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this the little white side, and I'm going to just kind of pull it up a little bit, and maybe pull the black down a little bit. And what that does is it kind of crunches your blacks and your whites, and then this little middle one is your mid-tones. So just find something that looks kind of nice, and I think I like that. So now we have a pretty good black and white image. Okay, so we have a nice black and white image. Well, we're going to manipulate this even further. We're going to run it through some filters to kind of give us some guidelines on where we want to place our highlights and shadows. So since we don't want to ruin this layer that we just worked so hard to get, we're going to go ahead and duplicate it once again, drag it onto the new button, create new layer button, and I'm going to hide the original. And so we're going to be working on this other one called Layer 1, Copy 2, and we're going to actually run this through some filters. So I'm going to come up to Filter, I'm going to go to Sketch, and I'm going to go take a look at Torn Edges. This is zoomed in at 100%, so I'm going to zoom out just a little bit so we can actually see the dog. And there he is. And you know, that doesn't look so bad. You could adjust the image balance over here. Let me scooch this over so you can kind of see. You could play around with that. You could adjust the smoothness and the contrast. But I don't think that's going to get us where we need to be. It's just a little bit too extreme and not enough detail. So let's go ahead and take a look at another filter. This is going to look at the stamp filter. There we go. Now we're starting to see a little bit more detail. You can see a little bit of specks here. So we could start playing around with the light-dark balance and the smoothness and play around. But that doesn't really quite get us where we want to be. There's just not quite enough detail. So let's look at photocopy. Now we're starting to see some detail. So let's start playing around with the little sliders. So we're going to increase the detail a little bit. Let's increase the darkness. Now we're getting somewhere. See, I'm kind of liking where we're going here. Let's increase the detail a tish bit more. Right in through there, I think we're starting to look pretty good. So I think I like where we're at. So I'm going to click OK. And there we have our filtered image. Now this is going to be the layer that we're going to be painting on. Basically what we'll do is we'll grab the paintbrush and we're going to, anything that we don't want to cut, we're going to paint white, and everything that we do want to cut, we're going to paint with black. So in order to give ourselves a little bit of reference, I'm going to take this original layer that we have, if you remember that black and white layer that we had, and I'm going to move that above the filtered layer. So you can see we have the layer copy 1 up here, and that's our black and white image. See, I can turn it on and off. And then we're going to be working on layer 1 copy 2. That's our filtered image. See, I can turn that on and off. So this is going to be the layer that we're going to be painting on, and this is going to be our reference photo up here. So basically we'll be drawing on this layer, and if we're not quite sure what a particular area is supposed to look like, we can flip on the original picture and kind of take a look at the original, and then start making alterations accordingly. Okay, so I guess the next step is to just start painting and see what we come up with. Now I'm going to take the layers palette. Since I have to work in such a small screen for this podcast, I'm just going to go ahead and move the layers palette off the screen. Just know that it is there. I haven't clicked it off or turned it off. It's just off the screen, so I have a little bit more real estate to work with. So I'm going to move that around so we have a little bit more space. Okay, so the first thing, let's get rid of all this background garbage. You know, we don't need any of that, and it just kind of clutters everything up. So I'm going to come over to the brush tool. I'm going to select that, and up here we have different brush sizes. If you click the little down arrow, you'll see different sizes. You could also right-click in your image and also give you the brush palette. I'm going to select a fairly large brush, mostly just to kind of get rid of all of this garbage over here and get rid of it quickly. So I'm going to just kind of test out the brush. I think that's a pretty good size. It's about 80 pixels. So I'm going to select that brush. Over here is our color. What's on top will be your brush color. See, if I paint over there, you see it's black. But if I hit that little arrow, it flip-flops these colors, and now I have white. So I'm just going to go ahead and come through here and just clean all this garbage up. We don't need to see any of that, and it's just going to kind of get in our way anyway. I'm not going to get too carried away with really trying to get in there with the details. I'm just going to kind of just knock some of this color out. Okay, and then up here looks like there's like some computer desks or something like that up there. We don't need any of that garbage either. So we're going to go ahead and take that out. Don't get too close because we don't want to be getting rid of any important details quite yet. We want to choose what we want later on. So there we go. We got the dog separated from the background. Let's take a look at the original picture. You can kind of see what we did. Let's get rid of this stuff over here. We don't need that. And we basically just kind of roughed it out. Okay, so let's go ahead and pick an area that we want to get started with. Well, let's see. Let's look at the original. let's let's start with the nose. The nose seems to be the most prominent and probably the easiest to work with. So I'm going to come over here. I'm going to be working with black. Make sure my brush is selected. Down here you'll see I'm at 100%. I personally like to work at 200% so you have a little bit more control. It's going to be a little difficult with my screen size the way it is, but we'll see if we can't make it work. So I'm going to right click, I'm going to choose a different brush. Now we have basically two different brush sizes that we like to work with. We have the number 3 brush and the number 5 brush. The number 3 round brush is about as small a detail as you want to go. This will create pretty good detail. You could create nice sharp corners, and it's about the width of a number 3 blade as far as like the kerf size. The number 5 is a little bit larger. As you can see, it's about 5 pixels, and I kind of compare that to like a spiral blade, like a number 3 spiral blade. That's about the size of the kerf for that. So I'm going to start working with the number 5, mostly because it's just easier to work with, especially since we have a lot of color to be breaking out. Okay, so let's go ahead and get started. Okay, so what we want to do is create areas of black and create areas of white. Remember, the black areas are going to be cut out, whereas the white areas will be the leftover wood. So let's go ahead and get started. Now, all this area here, as you can see, the computer kind of decided that should be more or less white, and these areas here should be more or less black. Let's take a look at the original image and see what we have to work with. So you can see this area here is the nostril, so we might want to define that a little bit. And over here is definitely white as well, or black nostril area there. So we'll create a white area here. We're going to have to connect that to our main part. And so we're going to go ahead and do that. And let's look at the original again. And this area here also is going to have to be white. And I'm not really, I like to have my shapes fairly organic, so I don't use a whole lot of straight lines, and I'm not too terribly concerned about how straight they are or how smooth they are. I kind of like these little wiggles. It makes it a little bit more fun, I think, and honestly, I think it adds a lot more character to your cutting. In order to pan around, as you can see, I'm kind of panning around. You could either use the little hand tool, or you can just hold down the space bar. The space bar will let you kind of move the canvas around. So that's kind of what I'm doing there. Let's take a look at the original again. And you can kind of see this thing kind of comes down like this. So I'm going to go ahead and take all that out. And let's take a look up here. I kind of like how that kind of comes in over like that. So I'm going to switch to my black, and I'm going to go ahead and outline all this area here. And I'm going to color that in. Now I'm going to switch over to a larger brush, just so I could chunk out large amounts of color at one time. And over here, I'm going to switch to white. And now I'm going to go ahead and color this all in with white. So, what about other areas? See, we're going to have to find room to connect this chunk here, because we have a little island here. If we cut it out the way it is, we're just going to end up having this white piece just kind of fall out. So we're going to have to connect it somewhere. So the trick is finding that special some place, and I think right here would be a great area. So I'm going to select the number 5, and I'm going to go ahead and connect it out like that. Let's go ahead and clean up some of these images, these edges a little bit. Let's switch over to black. Let's kind of clean this area up and take a look at the original again. Let's bring this thing down kind of like that. And as far as this area, okay. And we'll go ahead and color in those black areas and just kind of clean this area up. Okay. It's kind of a tricky little pattern here, but I think if we just kind of stick with it and keep plugging away at it, I think before long we'll have a pattern. Now, if you hit the X key, what that does is more or less the same thing as hitting this arrow key to switch between your black and your white. So that's kind of what I'm doing. I like to use as many shortcut keys as I can just to kind of speed up the process. When I teach for the very first time, I usually like to show them how to find it with the mouse, and then we'll learn the shortcut keys afterwards. But if you learn the shortcut keys, it's going to speed up the process considerably, and before you know it, you'll have a pattern that's ready to cut. Okay. Okay, so we're going to have to find a few more bridges. Bridges are this little area here that connects to the main board. I like to reinforce as much as I can, just to make sure that things just don't break. You know, this little bridge, sure it connects everything, but it might be a little weak, and you hit the sander on there. The sander just might break that little piece off, and we don't really want to be doing that. So let's go ahead and find a bridge. You can kind of see something over here that's kind of light. So let's go ahead and, whoops, Control Z is your best friend. You could also have, while I'm at it, you also have the history palette. I just pulled this off the screen here. The history palette will kind of allow you to back up as many as you need. You can kind of see that there. So if you need to back up, that's where that is. But let's go ahead and create a bridge. Let's go ahead and look at the original again. I'm going to create this bridge. And I'm going to go ahead and just kind of clean a lot of that area up. And this really just kind of comes down like that. And a lot of this is really just judgment calls. There's really no right or wrong way of doing this. I'm going to switch to a larger one just so I could block out a bunch more color. And but yeah, most of this stuff is just judgment calls. You're just going to have to kind of decide on your own whether or not something needs to be a white or black or what have you. I'm going to clean this edge up. Now here's a really cool little trick. Let me switch over to, let me just start with like a different colors just so we can see it a little bit easier, and I'm going to get a smaller brush. Okay. If you put a dot somewhere and then you hold down your shift key and put another dot, you see what happens? It creates a straight line there. And this is really a great way to have real tight control over your lines. So if you're really trying to get something absolutely perfect, this is great. If you're real jittery or you have trouble controlling the mouse, this is also a really great way to really control your line as best as you can. So basically this is just like an old dot to dot that we used to play with as a kid. And obviously the shorter you put your dot, the closer you put your dots, the better you could get like circles. Or you could just do squares and right angles and all that other good stuff. So that is a tool that I actually use a lot more than you might think. So let's go back to our history palette. Let's get rid of all that red. So I'm just going into the history palette and backing up. Hopefully we back up far enough. Not quite. The history palette only holds so much stuff. So let me put this on pause, and I'm going to go ahead and clean up this image. Okay, so I went ahead and cleaned up that image a little bit. The reason I wanted to show you that is we have this section here. You can definitely see a nice sharp line. And when we look at our patterns, it's got a little bit of squiggles, and I really want to make that a sharp line. So I'm going to have my brush tool. I'm going to lay down my first dot, and I'm just going to use the edge of my brush to kind of clean that up and give it a nice sharp edge. And let's just bring it all the way up like that. And it's kind of the same thing here. I'm going to switch this over to white, and I'm going to go ahead and remove some of this and just kind of make this nice and sharp. Here's another one of those judgment calls. This section here, yeah, in the picture it is black, but it's more of a shadow, and I'm not sure if people even know what that is. So I'm just going to go ahead and remove it all together. So I'm going to clean that out. And we got two bridges, one here, one here. Do we need another? I don't know. Let's take a look. Sure would be nice if we had another. Over here it's a little thick up here, so let's kind of take a look, see what we could do. Yeah, we'll just go ahead and clean that up. I'm just doing this freehand because I do want a little bit of wiggles there. Just keep things interesting. Let's go ahead and create another bridge. We'll just create it right there. So basically we have three holes here, one here, one here, and one here. It's held in place by three different locations, so it should be a pretty sturdy little area. Let's go ahead and take a look over here. Let's create that area. And like I said, it's mostly just judgment calls. Just fiddle around until you like it. Okay, let's do something like that. Let's clean up a few of these areas. And I'm thinking we're almost done with that nose. So I'm going to double click the hand, and you can see there's the nose there. Let's see if we like it. I'm not sure if I do. You kind of see this little line that comes up into the middle of his nose. So let's see if we can't add that. So I'm going to go ahead and continue to zoom in. And it's just right here that we want to add, and it's just not there in the picture. So it's just as easy as adding it. So let's go ahead, and it doesn't have to be exactly either, especially when it comes to animals. They're rather forgiving as far as creating portraits. People is a little trickier just because the fact that the little details is how you really recognize somebody, and so if you leave one of the details out, it might be a little difficult for somebody. So okay, so I think that nose looks pretty decent right now. I'm not sure if I'm completely happy with it. I might revisit that a little bit later. But I think we're getting to be about a half hour now, and that seems to be a little long. So what I think I'm going to do, this is going to be a multi-part series. It'll probably, probably take 5 episodes, I'm guessing. But tune in for the next video where I'm going to pick up with working on the eyes a little bit. Until next time, happy scrolling.